You gotta see this one. The woke left continues to spread division in society by relentlessly focusing on identity politics. They perpetuate a narrative of victimhood and oppression by constantly bringing up historical grievances and framing modern issues through the lens of race, gender, and other identity markers. What's funny is that their sick rhetoric always overshadows the significant progress made when it comes to civil rights, equality between citizens, and that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to show to Breonna Joy Gray, who was the press secretary for Bernie Sanders as he ran for presidency in the 2020 elections. But she kept changing the topic and directing it in a way that pushes her narratives without answering a single question Charlie poses. But before I delve deeper into it, let's watch the clip.
I want to try to de-Balkanize America, right? I think.
Sure.
I think these kind of the creation.
Unless it's the Boy Scouts.
Well, but that's gender. Gender differences are completely important for formative reasons, sociological reasons.
Do you think that it's wrong to have international houses at these universities?
I don't love it. I'll be very honest. I don't.
Okay, well then that's consistent, and that's fine.
I think that if you come to America, I want you to try to participate in our attempt to be a multiracial republic, right? In the attempt. Like, I don't love the idea of hyphen America. I don't like this idea of Chinese American, Iranian American, African American. I want to try, albeit clumsy, to strive towards the idea that I'm an American. Like, I don't.
So I hear that, Charlie. And if I could just say this, I think this is such a crucial point. And I've had this conversation with Glenn Lowry and Andrew Sullivan, and this always comes up. Part of, I think, why some Black people and other non-white people bristle a little bit at this idea that, you know, people like yourselves really want individuality and the ability to be your own person and not to be subsumed in stereotypes or groups or tribalism, is that the whole story, the whole narrative of advocating for yourself on the basis of your identity historically has been because by law, you weren't allowed to be an individual. By the Constitution, you were 3/5 of a person. By Jim Crow laws, you couldn't ride the same trains as whites or drink at the same water fountains. By redlining, you weren't allowed by law to live in the same neighborhoods as whites, or you at least weren't going to be granted a loan to be able to live in the same neighborhoods as whites. And many of those white neighborhoods had restrictive covenants in the lease that explicitly precluded Black people from living in those neighborhoods. And people wanted to be individuals. People wanted to be able to live where they wanted to live, go to school where they wanted to live, go to the hospital they wanted to go to, marry who they wanted to marry. And the literal laws of the United States of America said, no, you cannot do that. And so people started to advocate, okay, I'm Black and I don't have access to this privilege. I'm Asian and I don't have access to this. I'm Latino, I'm Chicano. And we had all of these movements to get people to be able to be individuals. So people bristle a little, I think, at this idea that the existence of advocacy along identity lines is to be balkanized. It's quite the opposite. It's to push back against the feeling, whether or not you agree that it persists, to push back against what people perceive to be barriers to them living their life fully as individuals.
Her argument has some merit to it, but there's a lot of identity politics elements in it. By the way, do subscribe for more discussions like this if you enjoy. It's no doubt that the legacy of laws like Jim Crow has left deep scars. However, significant strides have been made toward equality and civil rights since those times. For instance, legally sanctioned forms of racial discrimination such as Jim Crow laws have been abolished. Landmark legislation including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 have fundamentally transformed American society by outlawing racial segregation and discrimination. These changes reflect a societal commitment to equality and justice. That's why using a unified American identity reflects this progress and helps move beyond the historical divisions that different identities perpetuate. It signifies that we are all part of a shared national journey toward equity and justice. Using American as a common identity emphasizes the shared values and experiences that unite all citizens, regardless of their background. It builds a sense of belonging and solidarity, which is crucial for a cohesive society. By focusing on what unites rather than what differentiates us, national unity strengthens, and as a result, more inclusive environment is created for everyone. Additionally, these identities unintentionally reinforce stereotypes and biases by focusing on differences over commonalities. Referring to everyone as Americans mitigates these issues by promoting a view of people based on their character and contributions rather than their ethnic or racial background. This approach encourages individuals to see each other as equals and reduces the tendency to categorize people into predefined boxes.
9 out of 13 states had abolished slavery by the Constitution. Northwest Ordinance had all new territories were free.
And what do you take from that? That America wasn't racist?
Not only that, we were the first country to abolish slavery, not just continue the practice of it. I mean, every other nation had slavery, including today. There's more slaves today than there were back then. Unfortunately, slavery is the norm, abolition is the exception, and America led the way.
Charlie, you have to understand, you're not an unintelligent person. You know that that's a logical fallacy.
Why?
If you and I both have kids, and we both start beating our kids at the same time, and we're ruthless, abusive parents, and you stop a year before I stop, that doesn't make us not ruthless, abusive parents.
Wait, what is the point of your argument?
Just because one state stopped before another state, just because America stopped before some other country, doesn't mean that the initial act of harm, the initial tort, doesn't still stand. That's still a problem.
So where in the Federalist Papers does it justify slavery?
Why does it matter whether or not? No,
that's
Charlie,
the framework of our country.
No, that question is completely untethered from anything that we're talking about.
We're talking about the framework
Charlie,
of America.
No, we're not.
Okay. Then what are we talking about?
No, we're not. We're talking about whether there's systemic racism.
Okay, well, we were talking about the founding,
the reality of systemic racism. I could sit here and ask you, Charlie, do you know how many people came over in the transatlantic slave trade?
I could approximate about 1.8 million.
No, it's like 20 million.
Hold on.
Are you
20 million came as slaves?
20 million.
Hold
20
on a second.
million.
No way.
20 million came over in the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas.
Brazil or
100%.
America had more?
Brazil. Brazil is
Okay.
the number one recipient of
Okay, so what did black
enslaved
slaves
people.
decide when they met with Abraham Lincoln when they were given an opportunity for their own country?
Charlie,
No, that's an
Charlie.
interesting question, right?
What?
They wanted to stay.
Charlie, it seems to me, and this is something that I've noticed that you do often. If you want to debate someone about the content of the Federalist Papers, you got me. Because my morals, my politics, my values aren't rooted in the content of the Federalist Papers. I would admit that. And if that makes me a poor debate partner for you,
No, I'm just.
I completely concede that.
It is the framework of our country.
Well, those words have no meaning, Charlie.
They do.
What we're
They
talking
designed
about,
the greatest civilization ever to exist. And so if you're going to say the system is racist, then show me anywhere in the private
Charlie.
journals of the founders them defending slavery.
I don't have to show you private journals.
Let me tell you what I believe.
Okay, sure.
That we all have something in common. You know what that is?
What's that?
We're born into a world we didn't create.
Of course.
And every founder came into a world where slavery is everywhere. By the time they died,
It wasn't everywhere, but it was lots of places.
By the time they died, there was less slavery than ever before. That's a really awesome thing. Shouldn't we appreciate them?
So far, the only fallacies logically I see are coming from Brianna. Let's first clarify something. The number of people that came to the Americas as a result of the transatlantic slave trade is not 20 million. In fact, we don't have an exact number. We have an estimate, according to the Low Country Digital History Initiative of the College of Charleston at South Carolina, from the 16th to the late 19th centuries, over 12 million, with some estimates run as high as 15 million. African men, women, and children were enslaved, transported to the Americas, so there's no point in providing inaccurate numbers in this case because people already know the gravity of this issue, and exaggerating will only do disservice to the cause when they find out you're lying. Calling the Federalist Papers as having no meaning at all is beyond absurd, especially since it's coming from the press secretary of a former US presidential candidate. It makes you question if Bernie Sanders shares similar sentiments as well. To give you some context, the Federalist Papers outline key principles of governance such as the separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism. These principles are not just legal structures, but also moral and ethical guidelines that promote justice, equality, and liberty. Ignoring these documents only means overlooking the ethical foundations that have guided the development of American democracy. These papers also provide historical context and moral reasoning that underpin the American legal and political systems. The Founding Fathers grappled with complex moral questions about governance, human nature, and society. Their reflections offer valuable insights into the moral considerations that shape the nation's institutions. Dismissing these reflections leads to a superficial understanding of American political and ethical traditions, but I guess all of this is too much for a woke lefty since she was clearly mocking Charlie when he was talking about how the Founding Fathers left positive change at the time. I think what separates countries like the United States from the rest of the crowd is the constant hunger to improve our societies. This drive is evident in the nation's commitment to advancing civil rights, fostering inclusivity, and creating opportunities for all citizens. But what are your thoughts on the issue? Do you think that Charlie's argument makes sense and we should start using the term American without adding any cultural elements to it? Let's get the conversation rolling in the comments down below.